wonderful. John, I was going to come to you first. I mean, as a man who loves telling stories, you do it as a profession. When
Yeah.
reading this tale and learning about everything that happened, you must have just thought, yes, please. I'll
Yes,
tell this one.
please. I'm afraid that's exactly what I thought. I mean, it's a complete gift from a storytelling point of view, mainly because it's itself about storytelling. I mean, explicitly so. I think it's the first line of the film is in any story, if it's a good story, there's that which is seen and that which is hidden. And obviously that's the subject matter of this quite extraordinary story. And I suppose it offered itself in all sorts of very, very unusual ways, as a subject to make a film about. I mean, we know there are kind of two different kinds of stories of this genre, really, which are the battlefield ones, and then the corridors of power one, I suppose. And this, in a glorious way, is sort of stranded between those two, bracketed by the battlefield at the beginning and the end, because that's actually the stakes we're talking about.
Mm.
But exploring this strange, unlikely, unexamined world that's going on in between, which is not widely known about. I also like the fact that it was exploring a London in 1943, not a time in the war that we ever see represented, where people have become habituated to it, sort of eking out their own entertainment in different ways. And the people who find themselves at the center of it are the people who couldn't actually fight in the war, couldn't actually take an active role, and suddenly become the center of their own story. That's a fabulous thing to explore.
Yeah. And Ben, of course, is a sort of author and historian. And how was it delving into the world of cinema here? Because there's someone who thrives on accuracy and authenticity. Did you have to make peace with the notion of artistic license, which I guess is part and parcel of the cinematic experience?
Well, I loved it. I mean, you can be precious about the facts, or you can be kind of delighted to see the way that John and Michelle have taken something that I can't do with a non-fiction book. I can only infer emotion and the kind of the imaginative reality that existed at the time. And it's just wonderful to see it sort of filled out, if you like. I mean, these were people who were imagining a false world, a kind of false story, and then becoming completely absorbed in it, becoming, in some cases, completely obsessed by it. And that's been absolutely lovely to see that transferred onto the screen. It's been extraordinary, really. And this story is one that I grew up with. But I grew up with the legend. I grew up with the myth, which was the sort of black and white thing of, chaps winning the war again. This is much more complicated. This is a much more emotionally profound and rewarding story than that rather sort of two-dimensional tale that I inherited. And so it's been wonderful to see it become a fresh iteration, really. It's transforming it, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, there's scope here. I mean, given the kind of cinematic tendencies of this tale and the hard to believe nature of it all, to go down the kind of Ealing comedy route, maybe even, dare I say, the Monty Python route, and play up to the absurdities of the whole thing. But that said, there's something so moving and very profound about this story. I just wondered, when you first kind of started collaborating on this project, was there a conscious decision to be had to decide exactly how to tackle this material from a sort of tonal perspective?
Well, look, the tone is everything, and I have certainly been confronted with this challenge before, and I probably get drawn towards it. I like tones that shift very quickly into their opposites. You'd be mad if you took this story on and didn't embrace the Monty Python-esque qualities. After you got a dead body sitting at the center of the story, and that's certainly going to result in a certain kind of audience response. But I think the point is not to be afraid of it, because the piece you correctly, I think, or you've embraced what certainly was our intention, which is that as these people disappear into the fiction that they're creating, they become haunted by it. Because it's a game to begin with, and the creation of a story and make believe and so forth, and filling it with all their own details and their own personalities, I suppose, and longings and one thing and another, then suddenly takes on a reality of its own, and it delivers them into a space where they have no control over that story, but an enormous risk sits on top of it. And to me, this is really what the destination of the film was. There's a line that Ewen Montagu says at one point where they hope that somehow this has landed into the hands of somebody who will persuade Hitler that it's true. And Ewen Montagu responds, that's either true or it's a fiction we want to be true. And that little, walnut there right at the center of the thing was what I felt was really, really unusual territory. You don't know whether they're gaming you and persuading you that they've swallowed a fiction or the other way around. And I think at that point, the audience suddenly finds themselves in exactly the same space as the characters.
And it works brilliantly because it is slightly absurd at the beginning. And as the film progresses, and indeed as the plot progressed, what had seemed like a game. I mean, the original characters were completely alive to the absurdity of it. And it was great fun. They were having a lot of fun at the beginning. But as it continues and as the stakes rise, it becomes, they don't know whether they're in their own reality or a fiction of their own creating or somebody else's fiction that is being fed back to them. And John does that utterly brilliantly in this film.
Yeah. And then to end on the gravestone brought a tear to my eye as well. But anyway,
well, that's the story really at the heart of it, isn't it? It's that man. It's kind of the emotional undercurrent of the whole film rests on that character, and who we actually see in the story, and we see the life that's taken away from him at that point, and the new life that he's then decked out in. It's kind of extraordinary.
Anyway, thank you so much for your time today. Best of luck with the release of the movie.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!